to tell you about a wonderful instrument called the djembe drum and how it has inspired our go-go culture here in Washington, D.C. The djembe drum is said to have been invented in the 12th century by the Mandinka tribe, which is called Mali in West Africa. It has been played by West Africans from generations, forming an integral part of ritualistic life in Mali, Guinea, Senegal, and other neighboring West African countries, as well as right here in the Washington, D.C. area, guys. The djembe drum was and still is used to communicate and heal. It was used to communicate, sending messages from one village to another and to bring people together from many different walks of life. And that is one big part of why we are here today. So often we have seen the males dominating on the drums. But tonight, you are going to see some amazing ladies that have put their work in and who continues to pave the way for future percussionists to come. So, ladies and gentlemen, we bring you the beat of the djembe, also known as the congas, which creates what we call the pocket and go-go music. So with no further ado, please welcome the ladies of the pocket, and I am Devin Messina. Thank you.
Two. Check one. How's everybody out there? I said, how's everybody doing? Where my Washington, D.C. born and raised folks at? Now, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take you through...
Good morning, let's go.
All right. So y'all sit back and hopefully you won't be sitting too long.
Yeah.
We are the ladies of the pocket tonight.
Yes.
And we're going to show you what you got. Are y'all ready? Come on, y'all. Everybody put your hands. Come on, wave side to side. In the back, let me see you wave. Just wave and wave. Hey, one more time, baby. Where my ladies at, put your hands up. Wave side to side. And wave them side to side. And wave side to side. And wave them. Hey, show me what you got, K.O.
Show me what you got.
Show me what you got. Hey. Y'all not grooving enough. Let me see them hands. Hey, from side to side. Hey, show me what you got.
Show me what you got.
AJ, show me what you got.
Come on in. Good morning, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, introducing on congas. Yeah. She go by the name of Chaos, y'all. Chaos, show me what you got. Yeah.
Show me what you got.
Y'all put your hands together for Chaos. I need the monitors up here,
Put
please.
this show in your streams.
On,
like, share, subscribe. Let's go.
And up next, y'all. She go by the name of Little Boogie. Y'all ready? The Boogie. Hey, show me what you got, Boogie. Hey.
Show me what you got. Let's go.
Little Boogie, y'all. Ladies and gentlemen, R-E-N-G.
Yeah.
Come on in. Show me what you got, Andy.
Show me. Woo-wee. drummers. They got 2 sisters on the trap. Come on. Ooh-wee.
My girl Tiffany on bass. Tell me what you got, lady. Tell me what you got, lady. Tell me what you got.
Come on, everybody. Yes. Oh, RBI, what's up? What's up?
How y'all doing over there? Y'all all right? Put some more on the monitor for me, please.
I just want to let him get to my part real quick.
Oh, y'all live over here, is that right?
Here we go.
All the way in the back. Let me see your hands high, high. Hold up. Hey. Yeah. And we're going to have a lot of fun tonight, y'all. We're going to do a little singing. Hey. We're going to do a little dancing. All right. Come on. Y'all rock the pocket. Hey.
Come on, man. Come on, man. This church for me. No, we can't watch the whole thing. Told you, the 2-step is everywhere. It works everywhere. Look at that.
I love it like that, y'all. I love it when you do it.
Yeah, she did the intro.
Where you at, y'all?
I just need them to hit my part real quick.
That's a pocket, y'all.
Woo.
Yes, ma'am. That's what they call
All the way in the back. Put your hands up. Let me see. Hey. Over here, throw your hands up. Hey. Over
Here we
here,
go.
throw your hands up. One more time. Hey. Background. Hold up. Action on. Shut it down. Hold up. Y'all all right out there?
Come on in, everybody. Welcome.
Woo!
That was it right there. That's it. She had to test the water. Everybody got to know one of the first things I taught even my own children. When you hear the call, yeah. All right, come on, let's go.
They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You can play any and every position. Coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh my goodness, I see that again in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you, but what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, what's up, world? Welcome back. Welcome all, one and all, to I Mix What I Like right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, very happy to be your host. Please do like, share, subscribe, join the channel, support in any way you can, materially or otherwise. And appreciate you. And let's get into it. So already, just off the top, somebody already got kicked out because they misunderstand the project, misunderstood the last video, misunderstand what I'm up to and what I like to do and what I do on my Mix What I Like. And had the nerve to come in here under the name of the late, great, legendary Dr. John Henrik Clarke and accuse me of ancestral treason for raising a critique of Dr. Gerald Horne. First of all, remember what it was that I did, as I'm doing today, sharing an article that was sent to me by people in our audience asking for some consideration and discussion. I'm open to the criticism or well, I'm open to any criticism presented with principle and appropriateness. But I did invite Dr. Horne to engage, and I understand that he would not want to, especially after reading what we're going to talk about today. But it was not done out of some treasonous disrespect for an elder whose work I have championed and supported in interview and otherwise for years, and have been very public in sharing that the only criticisms I actually have of Dr. Horne are the one time we were on the Great Debate in Harlem together, and he said that he didn't at the time think that he didn't think it was yet appropriate or how did he put it? It was something about he didn't yet think we could judge the presidency of Barack Obama and may not be able to for quite some time, given the breadth of history. And I was already then and, beforehand and now saying that, he was highly deserving of disrespect or critique and disrespect. That is Obama. So that was it. And that Dr. Horne supported publicly the work of Peniel Joseph. Those are my only actual criticisms of Dr. Horne, which I've shared with him, and it's to the extent that it matters to him, and I don't, So, but if folks send me stuff and ask me to read and consider it, for the most part, for our channel, I'm willing to do it. And admittedly, some of the criticisms raised in that initial article seemed at least interesting and potentially valuable if they were to be followed up on and investigated and critiqued. Similarly, somewhat in the way that we're going to get into this morning with the article written by Martin Francis. So that was it. And then, by the way, under the name of Dr. Clarke, you would want to come in with that, given what Clarke was willing to say and do and engage in criticism of other scholars, his peers and otherwise. Not that I'm saying I'm a peer of Horne, I'm not at all, but I'm saying that he was, of even his own peers and others, highly critical in ways I'm not being and have not been of Horne, but this idea that anyway, so that was just, but outside of that, a number of you did get at me, and a couple of you have even unfortunately lost the privilege of further engagement with me. But nonetheless, it is what it is. And if I'm always interested in academic research and articles and critique and backs and forth and people putting their arguments to print and whatever. So even if it's to my detriment, so to speak. So I'm not, anyway. What was the other part of the preamble that I had? So just as was the case last time, someone sent me an article and I am sharing and reviewing it. My sharing a critique of Horne's work was no more personal than me now sharing this very strong defense and appreciation of his work, which I've done myself for years in interview, et cetera, and repeatedly. So that was it. And that's what happened here. And 2 days ago or a day ago or 2 days ago, someone sent me this article, which I had not seen. I read it. I think it's great. And let's get into it. So that was it. No, it wasn't. But the argument was by some that even sharing someone else's critique, that I was engaging in the critique and being disrespectful to Dr. Horne. And what can I say? Anyway, if the criticism, which some of you did bring, is, again, if it's brought to me with principle and appropriateness, I don't mind hearing it and engaging it. And there were some that really disagree with me, and we continue to be, we just, continue to move on. Some went a little far with it, got a little inaccurate, as was done already this morning. But, anyway, but that's why I wanted to start. So anyway, but also someone had asked me, was that you, Manny? Somebody had mentioned doing something with a little bit of Aaliyah. Shout out to Josh and Aaliyah, who support BPM had asked for a little bit of history on go-go, which I'm going to continue to do. So when I found that clip where the sister explains a little bit of the history from the beginning, I thought that was dope. And then they get into it. They killed it. So anyway. All right. So let's get into this article because it is awesome. I loved it. And by Martin Francis, and I believe it's already linked with and has Martin's contact and etc. on it. I'm not entirely sure where it was initially published, or if anywhere, but whatever it is, it's very well written and argued. And Martin got a little bit of humor in there too. Martin. So what I intended to do was I'm going to go through a little bit of I'm going to go through the introduction and then and a little bit of the meat of the argument and then the conclusion. So it's not going to take, I don't think it's going to take terribly that much time or that much. It's not going to take up too much time. And again, the article's linked in the show description if you want to read it more carefully and closely. And one of the reasons is because, as is necessary when doing this kind of level of work. And by the way, I'm going to leave the chat and I'll come back to the chat in a little bit when I finish. So if you want to super chat any questions, those get highlighted automatically, or just, at Black Power Media so I can make sure to see it, or be better chance that I'll see the question or comment and critique. And even if anybody wants, we can put the link in the chat and have folks come on and voice their responses, even condemnation up to a certain, I'm not trying to, anyway, you know what I'm saying? Okay. And the reason for that again is that it's very well done. So as you would have to do, as Schlager clearly should have done better with in his article, Francis gets deep into the weeds and to the footnotes and other sources and making arguments. And I just think it would be a little bit tedious to go through and, on here, but we'll see. I'll do what I'm going to do. And then I'll check the chat. And if you all want to, we can add to it as we go. And then I think we did link on Twitter. So if Francis sees this and wants to engage and wants to, add more or, say what I didn't say right or whatever, we can arrange for that as well. Anyway, so just quickly here, excuse me. Francis, well, I'll just read what he says here. Fred Schlager's March 2021 piece in the World Socialist website titled Gerald Horne's Counter-Revolution Against 1776 helped spark a furious debate between supporters of Gerald Horne and his 2014 book, The Counter-Revolution of 1776, and those who question not only the conclusions in Horne's book, but his scholarship and integrity as well. While much has been said by both sides in this struggle, Schlager's article itself has not been subjected to a substantial critique of its own. This article aims to rectify this. So that's already a very strong point. Horne provides us with his thesis in the introduction to his book. Quote, "This is a book about the role of slavery and the slave trade in the events leading up to 4 July 1776 in igniting the rebellion that led to the founding of the United States of America, notably as the seditiousness of rebellious Africans intersected with the machinations of European powers, Spain and France most particularly. It is a story that does not see the founding of the USA as inevitable or even a positive development for Africans or indigenes most particularly. According to Horne, the chaos of the scramble for the Americas between the Spanish, Dutch, French, British, and other European powers, coupled with the violent religious rift between Protestant and Catholic powers, provided opportunities for enslaved Africans to tip the balance against the European power by aligning with another or with the indigenous. For Horne, again, 1776 marks a counter-revolution. The de facto repudiation of Somerset's case on the mainland was an affirmation of the necessity of slavery, and this, at least for the Africans, meant a counter-revolution. And then continues that this was a powerful counter-revolution that arguably continues today, albeit in a different form. All right. And again, just pulling it up here from my own, just to read it, that the Somerset case again was in 1772, a landmark legal case known as the Somerset case. William Murray, Lord Chief Justice Mansfield, decreed that it was unlawful for Charles Stewart, a Boston customs official, to forcibly transport James Somerset out of England. Somerset had, of course, been transported there as a so-called property. And escaped, and then Stewart thought it was his right to then maintain and said ownership and bring him back. So that's the case around which Horne makes a lot of his argument, and Schlager does, well, as Francis points out here, has his own interpretation of Horne's thesis. According to Schlager, Professor Gerald Horne of the University of Houston published a book with a startling thesis that the American Revolution was fought to preserve slavery. This was no genuine revolution, Horne argued, but rather a counter-revolution waged to defend slavery against the true revolutionary force, the abolitionist British Empire. Hence the name of the book, The Counter-Revolution of 1776. The American victory was not a progressive or world historic event. It was a catastrophe. Horne suggests an analogy. The American Revolution created the first apartheid state. And then already Francis points out that nowhere does Horne claim that the British Empire was the true revolutionary force, end quote. Horne is also clear that London's rising abolitionism was far from altruistic. So already, excuse me, Francis is pointing out the key flaw in Schlager's approach, making claims that Horne was not in fact making, and then taking away the context that Horne himself includes, which is that the British had their own ignoble reasons for wanting to end the so-called trade. Just saying here that the mainland and the metropolis were approaching confrontation for another reason. Abolitionism was rising in London, not least because Britain was becoming increasingly dependent on African soldiers and sailors. It was not easy to enslave those of this important category of workers, particularly when they carried weapons. So anyway, as Francis continues, Schlager fails to understand that Horne's focus in his analysis of 1776 is on slave rebellions and the American colonists' fear of them, and not the other myriad disputes between London and the 13 colonies discussed ad nauseum over the last 2.5 centuries in American historiography. So again, I'm happy to be corrected on this, but this was a point that I feel like this was a point I seem to remember making in the initial discussion of Schlager's work in the first video, that he downplays Horne's focus on settler colonialism and the rebellions of enslaved Africans. But what Francis does in exposing that flaw is really well done in this article, and then in his conclusion, which I'm going to come to in a few minutes, really quickly clarifies what the problem is with Schlager and with, could be even said to be my own, but though I'm not called out directly, but the flaw of anyone who paid any attention to Schlager's work at all, including those who sent it to me. Anyway, furthermore, those interlocking conflicts, slave against slaveholder, indigenes against settlers, and Catholic powers against Protestant powers, not only lit a fuse of revolt that detonated on 4 July 1776, but furthered the development of, quote, a notion of, quote, whiteness smoothing tensions between and among people hailing from the old continent. So this becomes an important point that Francis picks up on, that Schlager misses in Horne's work. As he writes here in the next paragraph, the class collaboration of whiteness. So Francis says here, there's little mention of any of this in Schlager's piece, which is a real pity. Horne's exploration of this notion of whiteness, a detente in the religious and inter-ethnic strife between Europeans in a form of class collaboration, and its origins and development in response to the resistance of Africans to enslavement and the indigenous to settler colonial genocide across several of his books, is a colossal contribution to not only the historiography of the American Revolution, but to projects for human liberation as well. A more genuine critique of Horne's conclusions may have tested the potential limits of his approach, providing new avenues for research and maybe even new inspirations for global struggles against oppression. Alas, Schlager does not seem eager to engage with these conclusions in a serious way, depriving all of us of that opportunity. After misrepresenting Horne's thesis, Schlager turns to attack the evidence he claims Horne uses to advance his thesis. Horne's argument, says Schlager, hinges on a single legal case that occurred in England in 1772, in which a judge ruled that a slave owner, Charles Stuart, could not compel a slave he had brought in the colonies, James Somerset, to board a ship for a life of continued slavery in Jamaica. Somerset versus Stuart helped lead to the end of slavery in England proper, but not in the British colonies, where slavery continued for more than 50 years. Horne argues that the British government of the early 1770s had strong abolitionist tendencies, and that fear of British abolitionism was a major force that led the Americans into rebellion. This is how Horne arrives at his astonishing thesis that the American Revolution was, in reality, a counter-revolution waged in defense of slavery. But as Francis points out, Schlager is quite right to point out in his next paragraph that this case is not mentioned in Common Sense, the Declaration of Independence, or the Continental Congress's Declaration of the Causes and Necessity of Taking Up Arms. There are, however, some passages in this document that provide support for Horne's actual thesis. And this is where, to my point, that is Jared, is saying that Francis does a lot of the heavy lifting that I love to see in academic work. I love to read and engage and watch happen, but is often not done when people are both reading someone's work for support and or condemnation. So this was some of what I was saying in the first video is at times a problem when people consider whatever someone has written and whatever is said about it, because either we don't read a book as closely as someone else, or we don't, even when we're praising a book or loving a book, we don't investigate the sources. We don't often, that is, I think readers don't do the kind of work that Francis ends up doing here to come back around to defend the initial work. And it's a lot. So he goes through and finds in all of these other works passages that would seem to support Horne's thesis. From Common Sense, Thomas Paine's, the Declaration, then also the Declaration of the Causes of Necessity of Taking Up Arms, and the Declaration of Independence itself, where it says that the present king of Great Britain has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. So they may not reference specifically the Somerset case, but they're clearly referencing, as Francis points out, the broader concern of what happens when people who are supposed to be condemned to colonial subjugation or enslavement think differently about it and have different ideas. Anyway, Francis continues, while Horne emphasizes African and indigenous resistance and inter-European rivalries as the underlying causes of 1776, in addition to the Somerset case, there is a different work that centers the decision in the Somerset case as the cause of the transformation from resistance to British taxation and commercial policy to war for independence. Slave Nation, How Slavery United the Colonies and Sparked the American Revolution by Alfred Ruth and Stephen Blumrinson. So now this is interesting because, you know, as I said, a lot of people got at me for a variety of reasons after the first video. And I didn't even get into a bunch of other, because it's not my area of expertise. And I was doing all this other reading and trying to just, see what was being said. And there was a lot actually being said in different ways about Horne's work and about people who criticize Horne's, all the discussion. And somebody sent me this exact reference, which I thought was interesting. I've not read it, but theirs was to critique Horne. Here, Francis is using it in a way to defend Horne. Well, not in a way to defend Horne, but it was the reference was sent to me initially by someone wanting, I think, to add to the critique of Horne in saying that, well, basically saying his thesis in his book was not as original as it was seeming. Now, here, Francis is saying that Schlager gets Horne's point wrong because Horne is saying that the Somerset case, in addition to other factors, led to the revolution, so-called, in 1776. But he points to this book by Alfred and Blumrinson, or Alfred Ruth and Brumrosen, where they make the case, apparently, that the Somerset case was the cause of the transformation. And then he goes on to make a little bit of a joke here about perhaps this is the work that Schlager intended to direct his critique. So anyway, it's just fascinating. It's just fascinating. Anyway. Francis continues here. First, there were the prospective rebels liable to be hanged. This is why he's saying that this is why Francis is saying that Schlager's critique of Horne is missing points. First, there were the prospective, and why why Schlager's condemnation of Horne's approach to the Somerset case is itself flawed. First, says Francis, was that the prospective rebels liable to be hanged as traitors if their frank discussions were to be exposed. In other words, this might be a reason why they're not writing directly about the Somerset case, because they didn't want to be caught up in, they didn't want to expose themselves as being a threat to the crown. Self-censorship in the written correspondence should not surprise us. And secondly, the supporters of 1776 were well aware that they were soon to be taking on the most powerful empire in the world. So it does make sense that they wouldn't, if in fact there wasn't more said about it directly. It would make sense. But then Francis, gets more to the point here in addressing Schlager's accusations. If Schlager has constructed a straw man out of the mischaracterization of Horne's work, which is what the introduction and preamble of this piece is showing, how has his critique garnered so much attention? In truth, the core of Schlager's critique In truth, the core of Schlager's critique hinges not on an engagement with Horne's conclusions, but on Schlager's accusations of scholarly malpractice on Horne's part. In this way, Schlager attempts to discredit not Horne's thesis, but Horne himself. And that's definitely, I mean, it definitely got my attention. It was, and why I thought it was, because unlike if you read, and I did a little bit of this, but I mean, if you read traditional academic journals, peer-reviewed journals, and their review sections and book review sections and others, there were a couple of critique is maybe even maybe too hard. But there were a couple of critiques of Horne's work out there, but they were done in an academic way. They were done in a more principled, professional way. Schlager does get into some, the more salacious and scandalous claims and all of that you wouldn't find in those journals. And that did get certainly mine and apparently many other people's attention. In truth, the core of Schlager's critique hinges not on an engagement with Horne's conclusions, but on Schlager's accusations of scholarly malpractice on Horne's part. In this way, Schlager attempts to discredit not Horne's thesis, but Horne himself. The accusations of scholarly malpractice that Schlager advances are, one, that Horne truncates the quote. So then he goes through, and this is sort of where, this is the part I'm gonna skip over for now, because it gets. What I will say is that Francis shows that Schlager's work is itself a mess. I'll just say it that way for now, and that even where Schlager shows accurately that Horne maybe misses a reference or misses a citation or is imperfect in placing one or another. There are a couple of those that Francis points to here, but even in those moments, what Schlager does with those quote unquote errors is too much and goes way too far in piling on and extrapolating. So Francis really does it. I mean, he does a thorough job of going through all the source material, checking footnotes, going to the original sources themselves, and ends up, as he says here, do the examples call into question Horne's scholarship, as Schlager claims, as Schlager himself admits? Honest historians who deal with a vast array of sources make mistakes here and there. We feel these are mistakes, but Schlager's claims, they are so galling, not only in their magnitude and number, but because they are central to his project of rewriting American history, does not stand up to scrutiny. After clearly misrepresenting the very heart of Horne's project and making galling misrepresentations of his own, can we be confident that Schlager's critique is not the real work of fiction here? And I'll just say again, suffice it for now, that Francis more than demonstrates that conclusion about Schlager and his approach. And actually, somebody sent me a note saying, I just saw someone commented on the first video that they made a documentary about this GASPEE affair that is critiqued by Schlager, and that even Francis is somewhat in agreement, saying that Horne is wrong about the origins of GASPEE. And he explains and he goes through all of this. But the person in the comment said that Horne was right, and I would, so I hope that they share a link to their documentary. But the point again that Francis is saying, and again he demonstrates this very clearly, is that there are one or two, again, little errors that are made, as is, can happen when you're dealing with a lot of stuff, but none of it comes close to the condemnation that Schlager heaps on it. But what Francis does do in this conclusion here is, I think, get to really again brings it back to what is really at play here. So as Francis writes, so with the above critique, with the above counter critique in mind, what is the verdict on Horne's scholarship? After all, it is not Horne's conclusion that Schlager attacks, but his integrity. Is Horne's book worse than inaccurate and in large measure a work of fiction? Is his interpretation of source material so inaccurate as to be fanciful? After reviewing each of Schlager's accusations, we can confidently say no. Horne has made some mistakes, but if these are all the mistakes found by a highly motivated interlocutor, we can also confidently say Horne's work is hardly sloppy or shoddy. In fact, as this counter critique clearly demonstrates, if anyone is guilty of extensive misrepresentations of basic facts and quotations with an interpretation of source material so inaccurate as to be fanciful, it is Schlager. Schlager informed us that an exhaustive list of misrepresentation of sources and events in Horne's book would run nearly as long as the book itself, but his critique may have been limited to a few examples in order to make room for the almost comical Trotskyism in his conclusion. This canned anti-Stalinism has been conveniently ignored by supporters of Schlager's article, even by those who call themselves Marxist-Leninists. Considering slaves were an unpaid segment of the working class, one would think that people on the left would celebrate their revolts, their uprisings, and their attempts to break the chains of repression. These supporters of Schlager's critique, however, appear to share a desire for the entire U.S. working class to be on the same page to confront the U.S. ruling class, and feel that the counter-revolution of 1776 divides the working class along racial lines. Let me run that back. These supporters of Schlager's critique, however, appear to share the desire for the entire U.S. working class to be on the same page to confront the U.S. ruling class, and feel that the counter-revolution of 1776 divides of the working class along racial lines. So again, the claim apparently is that Horne, by playing the race card, is the one doing the dividing. But as Francis concludes, perhaps by a more serious engagement with Horne's works than Schlager was able to provide, we may be finally able to trash the class collaboration that created these racial lines in the first place and begin to work towards the long overdue real American revolution. Martin Francis, who is on Twitter at BMPT_defender. Right on. Right on. So I'll stop there. I'm going to come back to the chat. If you have any comments, questions, critiques, queries, conundrums, catechisms, cacophony, etc., calumny, consternation, condemnation. I'm even putting the link in the chat if anybody wants to jump on up here and say what they want to say. You can even jump on audio only if you prefer. Or just recycle your comments and questions, super chat them if you want them to be automatically highlighted, or put some at, I guess, Black Power Media or Mix What I Like or Jared or something, so I'll see it. And I'm also willing, if anybody's really interested, I can, if you want to do it here, I can go back through some of the details of Francis's article, but I just didn't want to, it just gets into, it just basically goes through the footnotes and then reorganizes arguments so that you see that Horne was, if not 100%, well, not 100%, if that Horne was either correct, mostly correct, and or it was overcooked in the claim that he was wrong, where he might have missed something here, there, or the other. But as I seem to remember, at least, and I think it's pretty clear, and this raises one question I have for anybody out here, is that Horne's settler colonial analysis and preference for or emphasis on the rebellion of the enslaved is a problem for folks. And this is the question I want to put out there, including those who claim that his work sparked the basis of the 1619 Project, but then he's not included in the popular dissemination of that work or documentary. Has Horne been involved more than I'm aware? And has Horne spoken on this anywhere? That is the reference to him, but not his inclusion in the book or the documentary. Anyway, Cabral, welcome to the platform.
Peace, peace, peace. Man, this person deserves their flowers, for real. This is great to see. And I'm reminded of our conversation in that other video that you put in the chat. And I think some of the arguments are similar, but I didn't do the scholarly work that they did to really make this argument. And I think it's important. And I shared it with some folks that I know, because we actually released a piece about patriotic socialism, so-called, saying how ridiculous and idiotic it is. And someone actually responded to that piece, bringing up Schlager's article. So then we had to write another response, basically making some of these similar articles that actually capturing Gerald Horne's full thesis, because most people haven't read the book. They just use those critiques.
Just so we're clear, who's the we and where is this piece on patriarchal socialism?
The we is the Communist League of Richmond. I can drop a link. And it's on the Virginia Worker.
Right on. Please do share the link. Yep. Please do share the link.
It was an interesting back and forth, but yeah, the Pat Socks, as they call them, really seem to enjoy this critique of anything that brings race, class, or gender into the conversation, especially when we're talking about the so-called American Revolution. And they like to appeal to authority a lot, bringing up Marx's quotes and his talking with Abraham Lincoln, or Lenin's talking to the American workers, as he did in that piece. But I think they misread the tone of Marx and Lenin in those conversations, but it's not about the authority of Marx or Lenin, really. It's about the substance. It's about the argument. Is it really a revolution? What was the change in the economic base? What was the change in the class that was holding? What was the overturning of the time, right? And there was no real overturning. It was the same people that were benefiting from slavery, be it by proxy, by sending taxes overseas, but the same people held the power yet and still. So, yeah, thank you for sharing this. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Appreciate you for jumping on. And anytime. Thank you very much. All right. And shout out, I don't know if they wanted public attribution. I forgot to ask, but I think they're going to end up on the platform. So at some point for their own work. So I'll check with them then. But shout out to those who sent me the piece in the first place. I appreciate it. By the way, that reminds me real quick to the person fraudulently using Dr. Clark's name to criticize me at the top. I forgot something. You said I committed ancestral treason by critiquing an elder, which I wasn't doing per se, but Horne is still here. He ain't no ancestor. So give him his flowers and his respect and his, while he's still here. Anyway, Andy Stewart, welcome to the platform. What's up?
Greetings, sir. You have been someone I've greatly admired for a great long time. And this is ironic because I've been covering Gerald Horne's books about this topic for quite a long time in connection with my own journalism.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, these haters on World Socialist Wall's website, and they're terrible. But the point that they're getting wrong in particular is the political economy, because coincidental with Horne writing his book, I made a documentary about the history of slavery at Brown University, and Northern New England was the manufacturing and financial hub of the emerging triangle trade. So, for instance, the story in World Socialist website cites the GASPEE event. That was a pro-slavery insurrection in support of maintaining the free trade of slave-produced goods.
Right on. So Francis actually, I can't remember exactly what he does with it, but he has a slight critique of Horne's approach to GASPEE, but he corrects both the record and the flawed critique of Horne by Schlager, even in some imperfection in Horne's approach. But I can't remember off the top. I don't remember exactly what he says, but definitely appreciate that your own addition and correction. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. There's a fantastic memoir by the grandson of somebody who was actually manumitted. The book is titled The Life of William J. Brown of Providence, Rhode Island, with personal recollections of incidents in Rhode Island, The Diary of a Free Black Man. And it gives a very vivid accounting of the period of the 1700s with regards to the way that Black and brown folk were getting treated in New England, which admittedly is my wheelhouse in this project, but you get the vivid image of an emerging indigenous African abolitionist impulse, I guess you would call it. You have this grandfather of the author, Cudge Brown.
I'm sorry, Andy, I don't mean to cut you off, but I need to, unfortunately, because this is a little bit detailed and long. If you would put the link, drop the link in the chat, I think we'd appreciate it. And there are a couple other comments I'd like to get to and move.
My apologies.
No, it's all good. I appreciate you though. Thank you very much for jumping on.
I appreciate it tremendously, and thanks for
right on. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Right on. Peace. Yeah, and please do put the link to that in the chat so we can all get it and lock it in there. The link to join, if anybody else wants to, is there. We do have a question. Thank you, Josh, and for all your support. How do you view criticism like this in light of your work on a live reinvention and Manning Marable's work as an academic hitman targeting Malcolm? So I don't know if I'm going to get to the heart of your question. So feel free to follow up. But hold on, let me look at it. So my initial thought is this is sort of the point I was making at the beginning. And I think I mentioned this to you yesterday, that I haven't done the level of work that Martin Francis did in this article. I haven't done that level of critique since Marable's work. So I always appreciate that level, so as I was saying, even in the first video, that to truly get to who's right or wrong, if you really, really, really want to prove it, you got to read all the footnotes and address all the sources and reassess how those sources are being used by the primary text you're dealing with. So I think let's see, how in light of your work on a live reinvention and Manning Marable's work as an academic. So if I'm catching you and I'm following it, what Francis does here to Schlager in defense of Horne is what we were trying to do to Marable in defense of Malcolm. And it was that level, although admittedly, I only wrote an introductory essay in our book. My essay only approaches this level of explanation just a little bit. Collectively, I think we all get to it, but that is the level of detail that I was bringing to Marable's book, and why it was so clear that what Marable had done was a mess. And that to the point I was also making, few people who know of Marable and his book read that entire 600 pages. Fewer would have read the sources he was building his argument from. Fewer would have even read the articles and debates around those sources. So we were doing all of that. And that's the level and beyond that it really, really takes to get a strong, and it's clear that Francis did that here. I mean, and I skipped for the sake of time the bulk of the article, but he really does take you through. This is what Schlager's saying. This is what the history's saying. These are what these primary sources are saying. These are what these other non-referenced primary sources are saying. Schlager is a problem. So as I said of Horne, if someone came at me like that, I would feel compelled to come back and say something. And Schlager, if you out there, son, somebody send me Schlager's response to Francis if he dares to, and he should. I feel like you got to. If you get called out like that, I mean, I don't know. People disagreed with me, before, but I feel like that, man. Anyway, so I hope, Josh, that I got to the heart of your question, and thank you for it. Dr. Ball, have you heard anything about the state's attorney sending corporations cease and desist on affirmative action hires? Only something in passing, but I'm not really up on it. So I would have to just say I'm not up on it. What's going to be messy? What's going to be messy? Uh-oh, what I miss? What's going to be messy? Oh, Silberg, what you mean? Uh-oh, big pun. Be careful. Might have to explain that. And that's true. And that's why again, this is all speculation. I haven't done the work on this, but I've become increasingly suspicious about that A Life of Reinvention book, because whatever I think of Marable's career, so to speak, this last book was a real departure. It was a real departure. And Dr. Burroughs went back for the book and went back and reread all of Marable's, was it Souls articles and all of these other journal articles that Marable had written. And I have to ask him if I'm remembering this correctly, but I remember him having that same, like the final work was a real departure in terms of quality, political perspective. I had interviewed him years before that on PFW about a book that I really did like, How Capitalism Underdeveloped Black America. And so yeah, it was yeah, Dr. Burroughs is a beast. Fort refuting the critique of Horne from the previous discussion. Oh man, my bad. I'm missing something there. I don't think that was. Oh, that's Jared Fort you're talking to, not to me. Okay. I see what you're saying. I got you. Anyway, I don't see any other questions or comments from me. No one else is jumping in the whatchamacallit. So we can go ahead and wrap that up then. And again, shout out to folks sending this work, and a bigger shout out to Martin Francis. Because the article is monstrous. It's very well done and a good read too. And I read one of them, but he got a couple little pew that I always like. Really, Schlager got to take this shit on the chin, clean his drawers out, and fix his trash ass scholar. Should be making shit up, sell his opinion, his trash ass scholar. Okay, well, damn. All right then. Well, I thought that was a question at first, but woof. Yeesh. I don't know, but I don't know. I still don't think Marable saw the final version of that book. Not as I mean, he was very ill at the end there. I don't think he. And when I saw that Wendy Wolf, it's linked. When you watch that Wendy Wolf, that one presentation that I linked, it's a lot of we It's a lot of we did this and we did that and what we felt comfortable with and what we thought should go in there. I was like, And then I know he likes to take all the credit for it now, but Zahir Ali told me to my face that he and that research team had less to do with it than, you know, he wanted to take credit for being on Maribel's research team. But when I pressed him on the content, he was like, well, we didn't really have that much to do with what was in there. You know, it was really all him. I was like, wow, okay. But that's not what you say when you're on tour and in front of those Netflix cameras. You don't say that part. You like, well, what we did and what I found. And anyway, but all right, good people. I got us a little treat to ride out on. We're going to ride out on some What Band, because didn't I treat you right now?
Man, South's in the house. Scorner, you don't want to get this one tonight, baby. Let's go, Sam.
You know, blackpowermedia.org.
Let's go.
And let's let the What Band take us out here. Didn't I give you everything?
Happy birthday to my man OG tonight. It's Virgo season now.
People be willing to
We
fight
gonna
for it,
start
like
this
Fred
thing off
Hampton
right
used to say.
tonight. It's Virgo season. They the reason for breathing.
Yes, sir.
One
Let's
time
go.
for my loudmouth crew in here tonight. Talking about Miss Shamika, Miss Ebony, Tasha back there in the catch out. Warm it up for the Meadows tonight. The whole day.